Alright, hello everyone again, and today we are on TNO Requiem this time, and the nation we're going to be playing as is South Africa. Now, there is a little bit of lore over here which you can read. Okay, so if you read all that, you probably know about our situation. It's not really great, we've sort of lost World War II, but someone else can explain it much more better than I can. Because unlike vanilla TNO, if we click over here, we can play this.
The older era of African colonialism has long since passed. The empires of the past have fallen, replaced by new powers across Europe and Africa, with Germania and Rome now dominating these lands. However, far from this transformation lies an older colony that continues to uphold its traditions, history, and segregation. Despite a changing world and the emergence of powerful blocs, this nation remains withdrawn, content to engage in trade while maintaining a distance from global developments, forever clinging to the status quo. Yet, internal forces threaten to tear the nation of the Springbok apart, as the oppressed begin to organize. Meanwhile, extremists in exile plot against the government just across the border. The ruling party grows increasingly divided, and before long, the peace that has lasted for the past 17 years will come to an end. The fate of Africa and its people now seems destined to be decided on the battlefield. Welcome to South Africa.
So before I continue on with the video, I just want to say that I like the intro, and the reason why is that not only does it talk about the origin of your nation, or what it is at the current stage, but I think it also provides a little bit of flavour into TNO, you know, it's something new. Now over here in the difficulty sense, we have very hard, hard, and obviously slightly harder. Now, if we don't click on any of these, nothing happens, the game just plays as normal. However, as for how the difficulty works, I checked the German African colonies to see if they got any bonuses in their national spirits that were natural, and I couldn't find anything. And because their units were still powerful, I think what it could be is that they get more units than what they do originally, and they're better equipped and better trained. So, as for difficulty, I think we'll do Cape Under Fire. Now moving over here, we can see that we have a diamond trade option in which we can spend diamonds that we gain monthly on goods and also to develop our nation. Which I recommend getting these three first, because obviously we want the extra diamonds a month that we can spend. Meanwhile, we also have Germany's anger towards us, in which if the anger gets too high, then they just embargo us. But that isn't really going to matter in the future once they invade us. Okay, so the next thing I need to talk about is the direction of South Africa. And the best way to describe it, it's more like how conservative or progressive your country is. And this is very important in the future because this decides on who wins the election in the end. Now, during your South African playthrough, this needle right here can be influenced depending on which focuses you pick. So for example, as you go down your focus tree, you'll find out that there's some focuses which lean towards conservatism, and there's some focuses which makes your nation more progressive. Then finally, what'll happen in the end is that when you pick your election, depending on where the needle is, depends on who wins. So for example, if the needle is left, then the Conservative Party wins. Meanwhile, on the other hand, if the needle leans right, then the Progressive Party wins. And then finally, if the needle remains where it is, which is in the middle, then the United Party wins the election. Alright, after that, let's move on to our decision tab to the internal affairs, which there are 3 things to look out for, and the first is the monarchy referendum we have. And the reason why we have this is because, after World War II, South Africa survived, but however we had to commit to a neutrality policy, meaning that both Edward in England and Elizabeth in Canada could not take the throne, as it would make South Africa lean to one side, which would then cause our neutrality to break. So because of that, the throne remains empty for now. And because of this does make us a monarchy on paper, but in practice, not so much. So anyway, the referendum is actually quite easy to decide. Either have 50% above, which keeps us a monarchy, or we drop below 50% and we become a republic. Now, the next thing we have to talk about is the ANC and the Afrikaners, which we cannot let them get 100% support, because if ANC power reaches 100%, then we suffer from strikes crippling our economy. And if the Afrikaners become too powerful, reaching 100%, then apparently it's stated that they will steal guns from our stockpile, but I don't know whether they give it to the Afrikaner state when they rise up, or if the equipment just becomes missing. Okay, and finally we have the chaos meter, which will interfere with this national spirit that you'll get, and the higher this bar, the worse this effect becomes. Now this thing over here is our base marker. And basically what happens is that when the chaos bar increases, it will always increase by 1%. However, if the progress of this bar remains under the base marker, then progress will start to increase by 1. So for example, it will start to increase by 1%, then 2%, and it will get higher and higher if the bar is not above the baseline. And then after the bar is above the baseline, the chaos meter will start to increase by 1% again. Meanwhile, as for my knowledge, I'm pretty sure that the base marker increases over time as you go down your focus tree. So what I recommend is that when it does increase, spend political power or whatever you need to spend to decrease the Afrikaners and the ANC power as much as you can before this meter is above the bar. And as for this whole thing, don't worry about it, because once the war begins with the German colonies, all of this will fade away, so you won't have to deal with it in the future. Okay, now with that all out the way, let's focus on our nation and see what we're dealing with. So, looking at our 2 national spirits, our nation's already in good hands. Not militarily, but economically we're good. But hey, at least this national spirit will disappear when the war starts. But to be fair, I hate the training and I also do not like the production. Meanwhile, as for our Air Force, it's abysmal. We have a decent amount of fighters, but they're all World War II. And we're fighting against what? 1960 jets? And even our Navy consists of British hand-me-downs from World War II. But to be fair, the German colonies' Navy is probably not good as well. And even during wartime when I do fight them, I do not see them using their Navy. So on the plus side, at least we can attack some German convoys. Meanwhile, as for the army, it's actually quite okay. I wouldn't say it's the best, but it's not really terrible. The division template is okay for defense, but for attacking I think we could focus on using our mechanized divisions. Not only that, but the motorized divisions actually have some decent speed, so that will help us out a lot when we're capturing cities and key points. Now as for our focus tree, we'll go down here to help boost the economy and our development, and then along here we'll just go down the progressive path. And down here it's nothing special, it's just for the army to give us some extra benefits, but so far not bad. Okay, so now that the South African War has started, there's a few things that we have to go over. Okay, so as you're holding on to your territories, I recommend, but not really, to hold the north. And the reason why is that much of your economy comes from there, and also your power plants. And the reason why that's important is because you use energy for your factories to work. Without it, you can't produce equipment. However, if you're playing on a much more higher difficulty than what I am, then forget about the north, just hold the mountains and the river line. Now, another reason why you should be on the defensive war is because not only does the enemy have way more troops than you, but you suffer from a negative debuff, which is the surprise attack, which as you can see, it's not really that good, isn't it? And it doesn't help that you get a minus 20% attack and defense. However, if you start to lose too much land, then you'll gain this national spirit that gives you pretty insane buffs. Okay, I know that we already talked about the diamond trade, however, we do have to talk about it now because we're under a different circumstance because we're at war. So as you can see, instead of developing your country, you can now sell diamonds to receive the munitions, guns, supplies, jets, vehicles, all kind from America. Not only that, but you can also use the diamonds to help subsidize industry so you can make it more stronger. And later, if you go down your focus tree, you can get even more supply from America by going down the left side of your tree. Now, another thing I need to mention is that in your decisions, you can also get some extra buffs if you have the political power, and you can even later sabotage the German colonies, which you can do when you go down, I think it's the CIA and the Centre South African tree. By the way, you also have an option for surrender negotiations, but who cares about that, you're here to win. And then finally, the last thing we need to talk about is the time limits that you have to capitulate the Afrikaners. Now, this isn't anything special, you don't lose anything, the only thing that you do gain, however, is an achievement. Now, the reason how this whole situation starts is that Montgomery, yes, the exact same British general, and if you're wondering why is he here, well basically there's actually some British generals that have stayed in South Africa in exile. And because we are at war with Germany, or well more precisely their German colonies, they have decided to join us. I also recommend that you put Montgomery as your field marshal because he has some pretty good bonuses and he's pretty high level. And what will happen is that he will come to you to make a bet where if he wins, he'll get a B-52. And as for what the player gets, well the player gets an achievement if they capitulate the Afrikaners within a certain amount of time. Okay, so for the focus tree it is divided into 3 main sections. So first off, we have the left side of the tree which focuses on US aid and building up your war economy. And then when we go down the middle path, this focuses on sabotaging the enemy, giving them negative debuffs. And then finally we have the most important, which is the right path. And this focuses on improving the army and making it better, especially with this focus that I recommend you get. Because for a reason why, if you complete this focus, this actually upgrades the development of your army. Now to be fair, this won't fix your army, you'll still suffer from, I would say, minor debuffs, but from compared to where you were before, it will be a lot better. Okay, so because we're currently playing on Cape Under Siege, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna hold the river line and the mountains and wait for the enemy to drain all their supplies, because unlike our industry, they don't have the industrial capability like we do, nor the decisions to replace their losses when it comes with equipment. And then, also in the meantime, we'll get a wait for some aid from the OFN, because what will happen is that America and the rest of its allies will start to send some extra units to help us out. And not only that, but even Iberia and later Brazil will even join the fight as well, sending volunteers to us. And I mean, just look how many expeditionary divisions there are, it's like the Avengers. Now, with that all out the way, let's go and liberate Central Africa. And finally, with the war now over, we can focus on rebuilding our country. Then after repairing the devastation of our country, we'll then move on to consolidating our territories. Meanwhile, as for diplomacy, to keep good ties with the OFN, we have decided to reach out to the former British dominions. And sadly, even though we couldn't liberate Britain, maybe someday in the future we'll be able to liberate the Isles and then later Europe itself from tyranny. Then finally, we have the Pretoria trials that we have to do. Now first off, as for the leader of the Afrikaner state, he was later put in prison. Next on the discussion, we currently have a witness from one of the German higher-ups in the colony of Central Africa, and his name was Rolf Steiner. Okay, so from the current report, in his first day in Africa, he basically witnessed many atrocities and rebels, which in truth they weren't rebels, but instead civilians that were picked off the street and tortured for information that they did not have. Meanwhile, as they were being interrogated, the soldiers have done unspeakable acts facts, just to get a false confession. Now, the next person we have is one of the German African colony's leaders, who currently led the colony of East Africa, and his name would be Hans Huttig. And in the current report, he is being accused of illegal conscription of non-combatants, various violations of conduct of war, and also on top of that, he's also been accused of genocide. Now, in the final report, with the 30 high-ranking German officers that have been captured, all of them except for Steiner have been found guilty, with Steiner being the only one who has been found innocent. The reason why is due to Mr. Steiner cooperating and due to him having been judged to have committed no war crimes in person, so with that, Mr. Steiner has been considered to be innocent. Meanwhile, as for people like Hans Huttig, their sentence will be death via hanging. And finally, with that all complete, we can now hold the coronation, which will finally make us a monarchy not only on paper but now in practice. Then, with the election coming up and the Progressive Party winning, the Prime Minister objected to the results but finally accepted them in the end, and then he would write a letter to the new Prime Minister saying that if there's any issues he can ask him for help. And that'll be all. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all next time in the Deep State Part 2.